Welcome to Know Before You Go for the third Sunday of Lent. My name is Father Brendan Curran, Dominican promoter for justice and peace for North America, joining you once again in this third step of our journey of Lent. We are all pilgrims. Each and every year we come to remember and recognize where God is reminding us that God's promise and presence is truly and authentically real to us. And how do we take from that treasured experience of our faith and bring it to our experience and put it into action with our lives and the people, families, and communities that surround us. This particular year, in a non-sacramental year, each year we have the option of two cycles. The cycle A, which is for those communities that have a prominent group or where they're present candidates of adults entering into the sacred sacraments of initiation at the holy waters of baptism, in the experiences of being welcomed into our church as adults at Holy Week. But this year, and we will focus today on the Cycle C readings. The Cycle C readings remind us today, consistently through the three readings, where are you refreshing your own commitment to God? Because God does not give up on you, even when you may stumble and even when you may take for granted that experience of God and putting that faith in action in your own lives, not just as a person, but as a family and a family of families in a faith community. Let's take a look at it. The first reading we have is from the book of the Exodus, the experience of how Moses is learning and beginning to appreciate his humble but powerful voice of being a leader of God's people. And this particular moment, God appears to him in a burning bush. And the voice of God says, take your sandals off and see the ground around you and recognize that this is holy ground. In this powerful sign of the burning bush, Moses is still feeling uncertainty, feeling a sense of doubts. And God reassures him, and the Lord God of our father Abraham and of all the holy family of God, the God of Isaac and Jacob, has sent God to you. Yes, that's the voice of God to Moses in the burning bush. This is my name forever. Let it be marked among the peoples. God is reminding Moses. And he is trying to understand how to grasp that wonderful, powerful experience of this encounter of God on that holy mountain in a burning bush, where he takes his sandals off and realizes and hears the voice that where he walks is holy ground. Not to be stuck there on the hill like last Sunday's readings of the Transfiguration, but to remember that we take that powerful experience of the encounter of God and all of those other moments of encounters of God, and we are called, we are inspired to, and we are challenged by God to put that experience and bring it and share it with others, putting it in action. That's what Moses was doing on the holy mountain, recognizing a message from God through a burning bush, recognizing and reminding him that where Moses walks is indeed holy ground. Through its muck and its mire, through the stones of the quagmire, of recognizing the hungers of being in the midst of wilderness, God is reminding him to also animate the people of God to recognize that this humble place is a place that God has provided and made fertile. We learned that more in the other readings that we look at today. First, in the book of Paul to the Corinthians, the second reading today, we are reminded, let us all remember, that these are letters after the resurrection of Christ, or letters of reassurance and nudges from the faith leaders to those new and early communities, how they are to be inspired and live their life of faith as people and sacred symbols and presences of God in our communities. And so, in that second reading today, we see the experience of Paul writing to the Corinthians with a big and correct and clear challenge to them. Don't grumble, those who are among you. Take advantage of what you have, the moments of what you are learning from. I do not want you to be unaware, kind of words of caution and warning. Paul writes to the Corinthians, I don't want you to be unaware, he says, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors all passed through the sea. All of them were baptized into Moses and in the clouds and in the sea. All of them ate the same spiritual food of manna in the desert. All drank from the same spiritual drink of that holy, sacred table that they had in the Passover. And they drank from a spiritual rock that followed them constantly. These words of the second reading are reassurances of Paul to remind them, don't get stuck in the doubts and uncertainty and the threats you experience as early Christian communities. Lean back on those forebears who came before you and trust in it because God already believes in you. Now the rest, you are called to do the same and respond to God. Start believing a bit more authentically and a bit more clearly bubbling up in your own experiences of God. Start believing and taking advantage of that faith because people before you have stumbled, people before you have had their setbacks, even though there were faithful people attempting to be faithful to an all-perfect and ever-faithful God at their side. Where does that leave us all? Well, first of all, words of caution of Paul. Don't grumble at some of those who tend to get scattered or tend to fall away from your communities of faith. Don't grumble. Don't grouse. Don't begin to cast judgment against them, of those who begin to divide themselves from you in your threats, in your struggles, and in your journey. Important words for each of us as we continue in this mid-period of the Lenten journey of faith. And then, above all, in the Gospel of Luke, we see this powerful sign, two separate signs in the Gospel story of Luke this week. Do you think, we hear written by the Gospel writer, do you think that because Galileans suffered in the way that they were greater sinners than other Galileans? There are words of caution yet again in the Gospel and the first portion of this excerpt of the Gospel of Luke, in which the Gospel writer is challenging the peoples, those faithful leaders, to not give up on the sufferings and stumblings and remember that bad things did and do happen to great and amazing people. God never provided an easy, smooth path ahead of us if we believe and trust in God and we believe that we share and accept our faith in God. And then God gave them a beautiful, powerful sign in this second portion of the gospel reading, the story of the fig tree. See, it's a beautiful story, but also a challenging story because it's a fig tree. Now, most of us in the Midwest U.S. aren't used to seeing fig trees. It's not our climate. It's not our agriculture. It's not our place of our culture. It's of faraway places where those are grown. But the story of the fig tree is about how the farmer and the master of the farm came to take a look at what was happening with the fig trees. Were they blossoming? Were they bearing fruit? Or were they barren? So the supervisor came and observed and began to cast judgment on that poor fig tree, saying, it has been here, we've nurtured it, we've nourished its soil, and still throughout an entire year, this fig tree has not borne any fruit at all? What good is it then? Why don't you cast it out? Why don't you cut it off and start over again? That's what he instructed to the farmer who was caring for it each and every day. But the gardener said, sir, leave it for one more year. I will cultivate it. I will give it ground around it so that it may become furrow and it may be able to blossom and bear much fruit in abundance. You see, the gardener is reminding us of the experience of God in our own lives. We are the ones who so quickly and flippantly try to cast judgment on other people or see that there's nothing good that could come from someone in the midst of a setback in their own lives, instead of seeing that God is cultivating in them like a proud gardener, ever faithful to them, providing water and nourishment, providing patience and a sunny space to ensure that we, like a fig tree, are given all of the gifts and nourishment so that we can blossom and grow. Yes, this is the parable of the fig tree in the gospel this week. And it is a reminder to us, we see the supervisor coming and casting judgment at the fig tree because it has gone over a year now. And as he begins to evaluate and see what progress has been made, he sees no worth at all from it. But the gardener, in hearing these threatening words, showed reassurances to the supervisor and said, let's give it one more year. I promise to cultivate and make sure that it is well fertilized and it is well maintained and that there's water and nourishment around it and surrounding it. It's protected from the bugs and ailments. I will make sure that this year, this fig tree will blossom anew and bear so much fruit that you will be made proud. What a great and powerful lesson to each and every one of us in the setbacks of our lives where we judge and castigate ourselves and think, what worth am I? When we make a mistake or offend other people in our family and in our community. How easy is it for us to judge other people? In how many ways do we do that in our society? Here in the United States, we are so flippantly and easily casting judgment on others because we perceive in them about their immigration status without knowing what it actually is, assuming that because they have an accent or maybe they use another language that comes out of their mouth at the store, or maybe we catch them talking to another person in the aisles of another store or on the street, we assume and begin to judge them with grave concern. Just one of many ways we judge one another. Or how about where we stand on certain social concepts or concerns, how we care for our kids in our schools, how we make sure we have safe streets, and how are we so quick to lash out to others? How are we quick to judge others and begin to flippantly try to find ways to make sure that we start anew, like that supervisor did in the trappings of our own human nature in this gospel parable of the fig tree? Yes, this week we're reminded that yes, in the human story, judging is not easy. There are times we get it right and where we mess up. But if we look over the whole cast of the three readings today from the book of Exodus, where God appears to Moses in a burning bush, and then Moses doesn't think, how can I tell this amazing story? I feel that I've walked in the presence of God on this holy and fertile soil. And then God said, I will gift you with the words to share with your people. That's what God had done with Moses all along, even from the bonds of slavery in Egypt. He didn't want to speak for them, and God nudged him and said, well, let me send your brother with you so that you can see you can do it too. And then in the words of Paul to the Corinthians, the early Christian communities, some of them have decided, well, let's just give up on this. This doesn't seem to be going well. And so easy for us to forget the privileges and the opportunities that we have seen because bad setbacks happen, and they happen truly and absolutely alarmingly to the early Christian communities. Some of them threatened, some of them jailed, and some of them even sentenced to death. So the words of that second reading of Paul is to say that, do you think because bad things happen, that means that you should be judged? Or can we see it in another way? Can we see it in a very different perspective of all? God sees a perspective to see the goodness in what God has created and formed in each of us, in God's image and likeness. And so Paul, writing to the Corinthians, is reassuring them that God doesn't cast judgment flippantly on us because of a setback of some ways in which we messed up, we harmed others. Look at St. Peter at the end of the Last Supper on becoming someone who denied knowing Jesus to save his own neck. Yes, God is a little bit bigger than our own human condition that judges so easily ourselves and others. That's the story and the beauty of the fig tree in the gospel story today. So let us take that to heart. Let us recognize at this crossroads of Lent, have you given up? Do you think, why bother? I'm not learning enough or experiencing enough. What is the meaning of Lent after all in 2025? Are you seeing a vision clearer in your life by seeing a glimpse of where God is truly present and active around you and in your heart? See yourselves as the fig tree that God is cultivating with God's very own hands, with God's very own fertile soil of our lives. Let's get at it. Let this week be a powerful sign to others. Let's let go of the doubts and uncertainties like Moses on the side of the hill, like the experience of the transfiguration of those apostles at the hillside last week, and let us dive into the experience of walking on this holy and sacred ground. Because above all, God reminds us that where we walk, it is sacred ground, the ground of God's holy soil of creation. Just like a fig tree, God gives you a second chance. Let's get out there. Let's preach that sign of hope to a world thirsting and hungering and hurting to experience the thirst of God's abundant love. Blessings to you this week.